All right, good day to everybody. My name is Andrea Aga. I'm the village manager. It is so great to be here with you today. Over the past few months, the village has been trying to improve our community engagement and our information sharing with all of our residents and make sure that everybody's aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it and who we are, and make sure that we can, really engage with you, answer any questions that you have, and give you a better understanding of what our vision is and what we are working toward. So I'd like to thank Councilmember Laredo for joining us. And if there are any other council members, I don't think so now, but any other elected officials who join us, thank you very much. Thanks to Gabby for putting these town hall series together. We've gotten really good feedback, and for those of you who have joined us before and provided us with feedback, we appreciate it, and we're trying to incorporate that feedback, including making these more of an interactive dialogue. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Roland Samimi. He is the village's new Chief Resilience and Sustainability Officer. Dr. Samimi has a PhD in Coastal System Sciences from Dartmouth. He did his master's in Water Resources Engineering at Tufts. He has a master's in environmental policy and his bachelor's in English and architectural history. He comes to us from the academic background as well as the private sector. So he crossed over into the public sector with us, which is great. That energy and that spirit of, understanding how the world works and how business works is important to be able to get some of these major infrastructure projects and moving, as well as the academic talent and experience he brings, which helps with the analysis and with the understanding of the science. So the game plan for today, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Samimi. We have a quick PowerPoint presentation that can outline, based on the way we kind of frame the discussion, some of the points that we wanted to address with the community. And then Jake is also with us, Jake Osman, our Public Works and BZP Director. The two of them are going to be working very closely together over the next several years. And we'll also have a very open Q&A session as well, so that we can address any questions you have. If for any reason we're unable to address questions at this point, we'll take note of it and make sure to get back to you with responses. We are recording the meeting for anybody, just so that everybody's aware, and we're going to be airing this on 77 Live. So welcome to everybody who's watching on 77. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Samimi.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. Just before we really kind of get into the few slides that I prepared, and it's really, it's not to overwhelm anybody with intense concepts or anything like that, but it's really just to sort of lay a foundation for what really should be a discussion. And I also wanted to just briefly expand on Andrea's lovely introduction. I'm going to hit share screen, so I'm hoping that that this will work. So let's see. Can everybody see the title slide?
You got it.
All right. So I want to stress one thing in this title slide, and it's really planning for a wet future. Since Andrea had a lovely oceanic background behind her, it really sort of makes the point. Planning for a wet future, being that we live on an island, is really kind of where we're at. And let's see, I'm going to just click. How do I click through the slides now? Peter, is that something that you have to do, or is that something I can do?
No, that's something you can do.
Okay, perfect. So our esteemed manager already blew through my education, so I'm not really going to waste any time on that. Professionally speaking, I did spend about 10 years in the private sector after finishing graduate school. That was with CDM Smith. I was working as a water resources scientist on all sorts of different water quality and water quantity related topics, including stormwater management and drinking water supply expansions and deep injection well design and construction. After that, I ended up going to the University of Massachusetts for about a 17-year run. That was out of the School for Marine Science that's situated within the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth campus. And my time there was working very closely with municipalities on issues pertaining to coastal systems impairment. A lot of what we do on land has a direct connection to the health or lack thereof of coastal systems. And I was charged with co-managing the largest estuarine restoration program in New England, and a lot of other ancillary projects. And I was also the technical lead in hydrology and the lead diver for the program. My time at the University of Massachusetts was really brought about by connections that I'd made with folks at Woods Hole Oceanographic many years ago when I was working as a contract scientist on a 8-year Antarctic research program. And you spend a total of 7 months over 2 years with a very small group of people. You either end up loving each other or hating each other. And what we say down on the ice is when you bleed together, you hang together. And those same folks were the ones that convinced me to go back up to Massachusetts from Miami to help run the Estuaries Project. And about 1.5 years ago, I ended up at Atkins Global, and that was a real big departure from the 17 years that I spent at the university and the type of work environment that I was accustomed to. And Jake, to his credit, convinced me that I should join the Village of Key Biscayne team. And I am grateful to be part of that team and very much looking forward to working with the community on the challenges that face us in the years to come as we live on an island surrounded by, and some might even say assaulted by, water 24/7. For fun, I like to do things in the water: decompression diving, kiteboarding, sailing, windsurfing, paddleboarding. When I'm not on the water, I'd like to relax, grilling with my family, growing lychees, and blowing my horn on rainy days when I can't be out doing the other fun stuff I like to do on the water. So that said, having grown up here in Miami and spent a lot of time back and forth between Miami and Massachusetts, I'm really happy to be on the Key and working for the Key, as I spent a lot of my childhood running around the island with friends. And so I'm especially motivated to see things get set on the right path for the future. So that said, the Village Council, I guess based on some visioning that was done through a committee, the Vision 2020 committee, established some strategic priorities that much of what we do is guided by. And they had the wisdom of including resilience and sustainability in that set of 4 priorities. I say wisdom because resilience and sustainability really affects every priority that they've established for guiding the community into the future. And a bit more specifically, when they were presenting resilience and sustainability as one of those priorities, it really was focused on ensuring a high standard of infrastructure and how that will advance the quality of life for the village well into the future, while at the same time being thoughtful to not have a significant impact on the environment. And that sort of gets us to, I think, an important distinction that needs to be made, which is the difference between resiliency and sustainability. And I think it's worth spending a moment just kind of discussing that just a little bit, because I think those two terms are thrown around a lot and very comfortably but the reality is, I think a lot of people sort of confuse the two or think that they're kind of one and of the same thing. So let's just take a look at resilience and sustainability and try and sort of constrain those terms. And the way I think of resilience versus sustainability is that resilience is really something that is forward looking. And you're really trying to kind of grapple with the future and what you think the future is going to bring you. And you know, and a lot of times the future, as we're thinking of it as environmental scientists or environmental managers, is the future may be bringing you negative, destructive events, pain that can erode the quality of life in your community. And that destructive event, or that erosion of your quality of life as a community, can come in an acute manner as a shock. Like, for instance, a large hurricane comes rolling into town and puts up a 10-foot storm surge. And so how do you respond and recover from that versus a chronic erosion of your quality of life over many years? That's sort of like a stress, and that might come in the form of sea level rise, for instance, that happens very gradually and incrementally, but over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, really has a very significant impact on your community and how the community exists within the environment and the quality of life of that community in the absence of actions to adapt to that change, or no actions and not adapt and then suffer the consequences. So really it's how your community is enabled to recover to its normal quality of life as efficiently as possible in the face of stressors, whether they're acute or chronic. That's in my mind resilience. And that's one thing. Then there's this sustainability thing. And the way I see sustainability, it's sort of like, well, how do you exist in the environment? And how does what you do impact the environment? And how does what you do consume resources that the environment provides you? Now, sort of like, or how does what you do degrade the resources that the environment provides you? And so the goal as a community is to live sustainably such that we don't have a large impact on the environment, and that the resources that it provides matches our use of those resources, and at the same time be resilient to the stresses and shocks, and stresses that the environment can throw at you as things have been changing over the decades of us, doing what we do. So those are some terms that I think are good to kind of have as a basis for further discussion. And then in this context, I should stress that Key Biscayne has been already doing resiliency and sustainability in a variety of ways, shapes, and forms. It's just not necessarily been formalized, formalized under the umbrella of resilience, or the formal umbrella of resilience, or the formal umbrella of sustainability. And so, Jake, maybe you can speak just a little bit on some of the things that historically the village has done with the Green Committee and the sustainability plan.
Sure, Roy. There are four major categories that Key Biscayne did a lot of work that, it's, like you said, haven't been categorized on the resilience umbrella, but it's a major pillar. For example, shoreline protection. That's one of the major issues that we face. The sand is eroding, our beaches are getting smaller every day, and we did beach nourishment. Not necessarily a resiliency project, it's more of a band-aid, but however, we are heavily pursuing on being included in the Federal Shoreline Protection Program, and there are a lot of efforts being spent to be included in that program. So that's one thing that's been going on for years, and hopefully we are coming close to tail end and will be included. They're very positive. Number two, stormwater. Under Jose Lopez's leadership years ago, master plan was done, which we are using as a base today to plan future projects. We awarded a contract with AECOM to help us kind of frame the picture on what we want to see, and that's moving forward. Utility undergrounding. The master plan was done. Some of the people in the chat, I see that they're former members of task force of utility undergrounding. We know what we want to do and what risks are we facing. So those are things that actually done. We've done a lot of studies. We know what we need, and we are very close to implementation level now. And again, like I said, these are not necessarily titled under resiliency, but in the big picture, there are major pillars on the resiliency.
Right. Thanks. Okay, super. That's great, Jake. I appreciate that. So ultimately, things have been happening. The sustainability plan was developed in 2014. That laid out some important blocks that the community would like to consider moving forward. The Community Foundation, to their credit, has been having forums to educate people about sea level rise, about climate change, about resiliency. A vulnerability assessment was completed a few years back by Coastal Risk Consulting to give us a sense for the flooding threat that is related to the interactions between tides, sea level rise, and stormwater management. And that's also a guiding document. So looking forward, the challenge that we face, that I face, that the Village of Key Biscayne team faces, is really reconciling all these various historical efforts and then putting them together in what, I guess for lack of a better word, we'll call an adaptation roadmap or a strategy for how, how to move forward in a resilient and sustainable manner, which then once you have sort of your roadmap, you can kind of get deep into the minutia of planning and then the challenges of implementation, with a thought that you're always sort of like circling back to your roadmap to see sort of how things are evolving, how you might need to adapt, how you might need to modify your roadmap along the way. So with that in mind, certain existing resources already in place within the Village of Key Biscayne. Jake has been here for a few years under the leadership of our fearless village manager, and he's been doing a lot of heavy lifting in advance of me ever getting here. And he's been doing that with the help from Kat Kulpa, his right hand person, and a resiliency coordinator to sort of help both Jake and I move mountains. And then we have Javier Pena in place, who's also been dealing with a lot of the floodplain management challenges in interfacing with FEMA. And then external to the village, there's a whole constellation of additional resources that we can leverage and tap as we move forward with the development of our own strategy for how we want to secure resilient future for our community. And I have good relations with the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Miami, Jane Gimbler, and as as well as Jim Murley for Miami-Dade County and City of Surfside. And we're all constantly interacting and playing off of each other's strengths so that we're not reinventing the wheel, and rather we're adapting each other's lessons learned to the characteristics of the community that we all live in. So with that in mind, let's talk about the context for resilience planning. And I want to circle back to the title slide, which is really planning for a wet future. And I don't want to scare anybody with this figure, this plot. because I don't know, people sometimes get freaked out when they see plots and numbers and it starts getting all sciencey and whatnot. But again, I'm a scientist, so this is the fun part for me. The takeaway message here is that these curves are fundamentally projections of sea level rise. So you have sea level rise on the y-axis and you got time on the x-axis. And what you'll, you know, each projection sort of sets up a range for the amount of sea level rise that one might anticipate by a certain point in the future. And what I really want people to focus on is we're in 2020, and by 2040, depending on which projection you're looking at, whether it's IPCC median or the NOAA intermediate high, depending on which one, you're essentially trying to plan for a future that could bring you 10 to 17 inches of sea level rise within 20 years. Now, that should be motivational in a big way, because that's a challenge. And everything that we think of doing on our island / life raft, in my mind, is got to be sort of thought of through this lens of sea level rise, because we're so deeply influenced by water on Key Biscayne. We're getting it from the sky as precipitation events might become more intense in the future and more frequent. We're getting it from the ground as groundwater table rises in the unsaturated zone, which is that zone between the land surface and the water table, starts to shrink, which basically erodes the buffer that you have for absorbing large amounts of water that are dropping from the sky. We're being assaulted by water from the ocean side, and then we're being assaulted by water from the bay side. And in truth, this is really, you know, gonna basically permeate every aspect of what we do on the island, whether it's resilience or sustainability. And I don't put it up here to scare anybody, but rather I put it up here to show that this is a reality that's coming in a relatively short period of time. 20 years is not a long amount of time. And in truth, as you're planning big infrastructure improvements, as we're considering on Key Biscayne right now, if I just say in the context of the stormwater management system, you know, these are infrastructure improvements that have life cycles of, you know, 30, 40, 50 years. And so, you know, you really got to be thinking as to what life is going to be like, what the conditions are going to be like in 20 years as you are planning the design of an improved stormwater management system. So 20 years is not unreasonable at all. And in truth, you know, the planning horizon may even be out 50 years, which is to 2070. And, you know, when you look at 2070, you know, you could be talking about 21 to 40 inches of water, sea level rise. And so, you know, these are things that we're grappling with as we start thinking about planning for resilience. So this is actually another interesting slide, and I apologize for the quality, because literally I took a picture of the screen as I was sitting in a workshop today with the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact discussing the previous slide, which are the 2019 updated sea level rise projections. And this was a slide that they put up that I thought was really informative as we discuss resiliency planning. And what you'll see on the left is number of days per year. On the bottom x-axis, you have years out. And we're talking about how many days in a given year might you see nuisance flooding. And this is based on Virginia Key and tide gauge data that's been collected at Virginia Key. So it's not like Key West, or it's not like Palm Beach. It's our backyard. And what you'll see is by 2030, as you go back in your head to the previous slide, which showed the various projections, if you were to just take the NOAA intermediate high projection, which was, I'll go back for just a second. NOAA intermediate high is showing 17 inches of sea level rise by 2040. That's 20 years from now. So keeping that projection in mind, you look at 2030, you're getting, say what, maybe 15, 20 days per year of nuisance flooding. But in 10 years, fast forward 10 years, which is really goes by the blink of an eye, all of a sudden we could be looking close to 60 days of nuisance flooding per year, And so I put this up really because, again, these are the lenses that we need to be thinking about resilience planning through. In this next slide, I put up really because those projections are used for anticipating what we need to do for infrastructure improvements, which are big long-term projects that take many years and a lot of money to get in the ground. And what you see is that depending on your planning horizon, whether it's a long planning horizon or a short planning horizon, and depending on the level of adaptability of the infrastructure that you're designing and your risk tolerance, you will decide which projection to basically utilize as you're trying to determine the scale of your infrastructure improvement. So if you have a long planning horizon and a piece of infrastructure that is going to be around for 50, 60, 70 years, you may not want to be using IPCC median because that is a lower projection of what things may look like in the future. And you may be wanting to be erring on the side of conservative such that you don't end up having a failed infrastructure project as you then face the environmental challenges of 50 years down the road. Similarly, if you have a short project that is very adaptable and you have a relatively high risk tolerance, you could go for a projection that would anticipate lower sea level rises because you have the time to adapt your project to the changes that may be beyond the original projection that you had, So as we start thinking of our resilience program and our adaptation strategy or our resilience, really sort of juggling immediate, short-term and long-term implementation projects and level of service, which is, okay, maybe an immediate action would be to just focus on maintaining an existing level of service, whereas a short-term action, 10 years, 20 years down the road, might be looking to improve the existing level of service because it's inadequate either presently or inadequate based on what we think things are going to be like 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road. And then in the long term, in the long run, the action plan may have a different scale of project with a level of service that is to become a model city based on all the innovative stuff that we're doing. But again, all of these things are balanced out by your level of comfort with risk and your ability to invest in the projects and the infrastructure improvements that are needed for a planned sea level rise 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And as a community, that's something that we're going to have to decide, how we want to, how we want to do it and to what level we want to do it. And in me coming to the village of Key Biscayne, one of my big goals is to understand where people's heads and hearts are relative to the challenges they face. And as a scientist, my responsibility is really to present the reality that may be, with a certain level of certainty and uncertainty. All these projections are projections. They have exceedance probabilities and they have uncertainty built into them, and we don't have we don't have a crystal ball. So we're doing the best we can to plan for the future, which inherently has uncertainty because the models that exist quantify things as best they can, like the rate of ice melt in Antarctica and Greenland, or the amount of permafrost thaw and the effect that methane has on CO2 or amplifying CO2 concentrations, all this sort of stuff. But nevertheless, what remains is that we have to plan for the future, and there are some very clear pillars of resilience that have come out of the discussions, excuse me, the discussions that I've had and what I've learned. And as Jake had sort of highlighted, one of them is shoreline protection. The other one is stormwater management. The other is utility undergrounding. And the fourth is complete streets, which essentially means dry streets. And what do we do? What do we do to modify the streetscape, elevations and otherwise, to essentially deal with the water that is the common thread through all of this? And as far as utilities undergrounding is concerned, how do we maintain our accessibility to steady power and other utility services in the face of large shocks like hurricanes and chronic stresses, like a rising groundwater table due to sea level rise and tidal effects and stormwater, large stormwater volumes. And shoreline protection, I especially love as a coastal system scientist. And that's our first line of defense. I mean, let's not mince any words. It's a first line of defense. Your first line of defense are the coral reefs. The next first line of defense is the beach itself. Then the next line of defense are the dunes. And as we're being chronically stressed by sea level rise, we're challenged to come up with strategies to protect our shoreline in perpetuity, because the problem is never going away, and as effectively and efficiently as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we've been pushing so hard to get integrated into U.S. Army Corps of Engineers feasibility study, because if we can do that, then the Corps will be dedicating a steady stream of financial resources for supporting our beach nourishment efforts, and may also be supportive of the concept of establishing some sort of submerged breakwater, discontinuous submerged breakwater offshore of the erosional hotspot that is Key Biscayne's beach, such that maybe we can extend the time between nourishments and then sort of better leverage the dollars available to do each beach nourishment. So with those four pillars in mind and that background on the basics of resilience, I want people to sort of understand that this is sort of an existential crisis for our region, for South Florida. And all kidding aside, 23 and some change $billion of existing property could be lost by 2050, due to sea level rise. And 152 billion in coastal property is likely at risk of inundation at high tides due to sea level rise. So we've got some serious heavy lifting to do, and I want the discussion to really exist in this context, because that's sort of the challenge that we face. But on a happy note, we live in a beautiful place, and we live on an island paradise, and there's no reason why we shouldn't do our darndest to maintain the quality of life that we have on this island paradise for as long as we can. And with the recognition that we're constantly going to be evolving and adapting to a changing environment that was the way it's always been. The environment's always changing. It's just why it's changing and how it's changing and how fast it's changing, can be debated. And that's not a debate that I necessarily want to have right now, but I'm happy to debate it with anybody anytime. And so with that all said, I'm hopeful. It's not going to be easy. It's a major challenge, but I'm here to stay, and I have a feeling that you guys are all here to stay. So the question then becomes, all right, so how do we do the heavy lifting that's got to be done? That said, I'm going to just open it up to questions, and I'm going to let our esteemed clerk kind of run that side of the show.
All right, good evening, everyone. If you wish to speak or have any questions for the panel, please raise your hand in the application, or if you're on camera. Mr. Lopez, Mr. Jose Lopez, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, I think you done an excellent presentation of the problem. And we have been living with this for quite a while, and I don't know for how long I will live for it. But there are some issues that are short-term that should have been done before and hasn't been done, and some things that are already being addressed in the projects that the village is pursuing. But one thing that is a fact, and we know that it's happening all along, is the water coming out of the ground in parking areas that are a low level. And I think one thing that we should do, and this is just very specific, but it's a fact, that when we build new parking areas that are below the ground level, below like we have in the community center, we should require that an impervious liner be installed as part of the project. We did that with the community center, and it has been very successful. Mm-hmm. All their buildings that exist in the village, like in the towers or the Commodore, you go there during the Quintile, and the Quintile is coming in October, September, October, whatever, and you'll see the water coming from the cracks.
Right.
And it's very little you can do once the building is built. But any new construction, such as, and this is why I triggered this, St. Agnes Church is going to build 2 parking spaces. And I'm terrified that they might not properly line these areas. Also, houses might be tempted to have underground garages that will be flooded with 10 inches, not 10 inches, as it is.
Right.
For the future.
Right.
And they will be flooded every time we have a king tide situation. And it's going to get worse and worse, and that this is a continuous situation. But there is no rule in the books right now to force the issue of avoiding water coming from the ground in low parking areas. And
Right.
but I don't think it has been addressed in all along. And we had bad situations that we have seen.
Understood. And that's a very good comment that you make. And part of the reason why I want to stress that water is going to touch everything that we do and think of moving forward in the village of Key Biscayne, and why I want all the decisions that are being made to evolve whatever, the building and zoning laws or the ordinances, to be thought of through the lens of 10 to 17 inches of sea level rise in 20 years. And that's going to require all sorts of different changes that, that we're going to have to go through, step by step and evolve in order to become more resilient. So I agree with everything.
Ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to give a perspective from an elected official with a considerable experience in the private sector and public sector. The village council is the board of directors of shareholders, which are the taxpayers. And then we, of course, hire management to get the will of the people done. Our shareholders, while they speak different languages and all this government speak, are requiring short answers and short action plans. This village, in my opinion, I've been here 40 years, is fatigued, overly fatigued, with both time and spending of significant amounts of money and studies. And studies about what we do, and very little of it is done. You highlighted even from 2007 to today, with just that alone is 13 years. And I think people, as you move forward in this process, land manager, and those, since this is targeted, this seminar is not for all of you who work in the administration. It's to try to educate our public, and they have a different kind of need. I want to know, as an elected official, who are the trustees, the original name of this council, we're a board of trustees, of their money, my shareholders, what are we going to do right now? What are we doing immediately that we can begin to address an intellectual discussion and further planning and consolidations of plans? You used the phrase planning for resiliency. Falls short of my expectations, and clearly falls short of the expectations and or understanding of our shareholders. So as we move forward with either Jake or whoever else in the staff, we need to be able to tell people we already got this. Resiliency, to me, resilience, sustainability, we always in the public sector come up with new words that people have to go to their dictionaries. Sustainability is more of an educational process, educating patients. Resiliency is now. Flooding, people want to understand, what are we going to do with my taxpayers' money to avoid what we had a couple of weeks ago, that Key Biscayne became a lake. The rest of the stuff is wonderful. It's absolutely admirable. I admire your background and professional scientific knowledge. The shareholders have, unfortunately, short-term goals, just like shareholders want to know their quarterly earnings. And that's who I represent. And it would help you do your job better if we get focused, we get simple, and we move from study to doing. So my question, and I hope it's a constructive reflection, it's not a criticism. I'm trying to help us all educate our base. Now, people are hungry for action. So I am one, of course, of 7, but people, I can tell you categorically and scientifically that this village and its taxpayers are fed up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of studies for this and a study for that and a study for the other, and no action. So hopefully we can turn this conversation and seminar a little bit tilted towards what I'm going to do short term, not in the year 2040, but what I'm going to do about the flooding. People were starting to go to the beach finally this week under this terrible 2 months, and I'm looking out the window and it's terrible, as you know. And all of the other stuff is wonderful and everything else. But we need to know, Madam Manager, what within the realm of possibility, because I also I'm just as hard and fair with my shareholders. You know, we do not control nature, but certainly we can do certain things to alleviate nature's impact on our area. So I would hope that you take this constructively, but we ought to move not only in this web seminar, but in terms of moving forward in your mindset as administrators and professional administrators, that our community is hungry for visible action.
Right. I completely agree with everything that you just said. And I personally hate studies as well, because I think you can study yourself to death. And that's partly the reason why I never went into basic research, but rather went into applied science and working with municipalities specifically to look at problems that municipalities have and come up with solutions. Now, the reality is we do need some sort of guiding document for how we're going to do our actions. Now, I'm a firm believer that we understand that stormwater is a problem on this island. We don't have to come up with some big resiliency action plan to figure out that stormwater is a problem on this island. To that end, I've been working with Jake, and Jake has, for the last couple of years, been putting into place a mechanism of working with AECOM to actually get a stormwater system upgrade done on this island. I mean, we can't just snap our fingers and get it done, you know, but we're heading in that direction. We're going to start with K8, and then beyond that, we're going to figure out what else needs to be done and then get the funding in place to do it. Similarly, with the shoreline protection, we understand that the beach is being threatened and is eroding away all the time, and that we constantly need to be renourishing it. So what is the most cost-effective way of doing that? And so we're pushing hard to get integrated into the Army Corps program, and hopefully that'll come through, and we'll have a steady stream of federal dollars to support our beach nourishment needs for the next 50 years. And that would be a huge win. Similarly, I'm in the process of putting together a grant application to submit by July 31st to really take a very hard look at the hydrodynamic viability of a submerged breakwater to try and secure the beach as best as possible between nourishments. So these are all things that we can do while at the same time sketching out this plan of action, which is our sort of roadmap for each big infrastructure project that we want to tackle in order to maintain quality of life and maintain property values in this village as sea level rise threatens all of those things. So I agree with you 100%. I don't want to spend the rest of my career studying stuff and not getting things done. What trips my trigger is seeing a problem, figuring out how to solve it, and then implementing something to solve it. So I think we're on the same page.
Yes, Mr. Alan Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Yeah, I think we're, Luis, I'm thrilled to hear your comments, and you know, I've certainly, you know, from my constant hectoring at board meetings how strongly I feel about this, and I really think we're in a position now to take meaningful action on all four of these prongs pretty much right away. As Roland just noted, and you'll forgive me if I stop for a second and say something about Roland, because I didn't realize it till right now, till earlier today, but Roland's father was a physician who was in one of the first cases I ever tried. Roland's father was one of my witnesses. And
small world.
And then as it turned out, Roland's father was one of my wife's doctors. And When I saw your face, I see your dad's face, and it makes me happy. He was a great man. But
Thank you.
I took Roland's comments about 2040 and 2070 to be kind of a shaking of the shoulders of our community, that this isn't a joke. And again, if we're all shareholders and our company owned a factory next to a river that was rising, we would be asking our CEO and our board to be coming up with a plan to deal with it. And obviously, and I think the plan is basically there on shoreline protection. We've got to get to work with the Corps. On stormwater, we've already had one project which has saved us from being Sweetwater over the last few years. But even that's not enough in the face of the rising seas. We got to keep working at it. I saw Mr. Goldmeyer's comments in the paper a couple of weeks ago that we have plenty of time to deal with it, and that came out the same day. That column came out the same day as kids were water skiing down my street. So, right. I get it. It's not a 2040 project, so we got to get on that right away. Utility burial, I think we've all been working on that. And I'm not sure the legislature is quite done dithering around with this, but I do know, we saw how much it's going to cost, and there's talk about, how much FP&L is going to pay for it, how much the state is going to pay for it, but we got to get going. I think, the shareholders want to know now what we're going to do with it. And with regard to the streetscape, it's the same thing. I mean, the fact is that our island and our causeway was built by people taking a bunch of sand and piling it up and getting it in place. Okay. Right. We're going to have to do that again. It's not really rocket science. We're going to have to do all these things. And at the same time, we have a situation where we have record low interest rates that are going to be there for, it looks now, for at least a couple of years. And we've got an administration and a Congress that every time they open their mouths and say infrastructure, the stock market goes up a couple of 100 points. So everybody thinks infrastructure is a good idea. And it's almost a certainty that if we work with our congressional delegation right now and our state delegation right now, we should be able to get funds to help us do all of these infrastructure projects. But I would maintain that at the same time, if we come to the table showing that we have a dog in the fight and we're putting up our own dollars to do this, which we can access at almost free money. This isn't like a close call. We know what we have to do. I'm looking forward to meeting with Roland because I've got some ideas on shoreline protection. And again, I'm not a scientist. It's just what appears to me some things we can do, and the way sand is backing up just to our north in
Sure.
Crandon Park.
Well, we're most definitely going to talk about that together. We got that scheduled.
Yeah, but I think I think Luis is right. I think people are, we all realize that our most important investment for just about all of us, whether we're voters in Key Biscayne or not, our most important investment as taxpayers in Key Biscayne is our property values, our ability to get mortgages, our ability to get insurance.
Right.
And if we don't get on this right now, yesterday, we're in trouble.
100% agree. And all of those things are going to be contingent upon what we do with our infrastructure on this island. It's pretty clear and pretty evident. So I agree with what you're saying.
Thank you. It's great to meet you virtually.
Likewise.
All right, first I will have Mr. Donald Ellisberg and then Mr. Fausto Gomez. Don, can you unmute?
John mute? Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
I probably have a mini version of Councilman Laredo and former Councilman Fine to react to. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about a list of participants in your activities that exclude anybody from the public. I think you're excluding all the people that are participating except the brass. I think it is a horrible, horrible way to do business in Key Biscayne, and it has brought everybody who's tried to do it that way to a halt. That's number one. We have had, only my own instance, and I don't pretend to be that much of an expert, but we had a year and a half or so of an underground power project that was very much involved in resiliency and everything else that's going on here, including sea level rise. We had 3 people who were chairs. I had 7 people who were really smart. And I don't know that you've talked to anybody. I don't know. There's nothing in anything you said that indicates that you have any indication of what they've done here in the last 10 years. And so many people are here on the island who they're going to hear your first, I'm going to plan this, or I'm going to get together and we're going to do a plan. They're going to blow you out of the water. And I like
Right.
you. I think you're very nice. I've also, my wife and I spent a couple of weeks on a cruise in Antarctica last winter. So I understand the kind of stuff you do down there.
Right.
But I'm trying to give you a practical side that if you don't talk to the people who know something, and you've heard from a couple of them today. You've heard from Jose, you've heard from Alan, you've heard from Councilman Laredo. These are people who know something about what's going on, and they
Right.
need to be in your orbit someplace. It doesn't mean
Absolutely.
you need a commission of 50 people to fool around again. But
Right.
You've got to indicate that you know something from them, that you've learned
Yeah.
something here and are not giving us lecture number 2 from the university, because that's exactly what it sounded like. It was
Right.
brilliant, it was smart, but it doesn't have anything much to do with where the hell we are now. Whether you're going to have a sea level rise of 40 inches or 172 inches is important, and we have to make that decision. But we're not going to study it for 10 more years.
Right. So here's the thing. I agree with everything.
That's just my point.
Yeah, no, a good, absolutely good thoughts. And in truth, taking this job, the first thing that I committed to for myself was to actually get to understanding what's been done, who's done it. There's a lot of knowledge out there. In my defense, I've only been sitting in this chair for 2 months. And so my thought has never been to really come into Key Biscayne and then impose on Key Biscayne what I believe to be the solution for Key Biscayne for the next 30 years, as if I'm the grand poobah of all things resiliency and sustainability, but rather get to know the community, get to talking to people who've lived in this community for 30, 40, 50 years, understand what's been done, understand where the gaps are, understand how to leverage the things that have been done to move forward into the future. That's all. So I agree with everything that you say.
I'm with you. I think maybe you should have waited to give your speech until then, but I'm really saying.
All right, Miss Manager, why don't you take that one to heart?
I'll take that one. I'll take that
Let
one.
me jump in and ask Fausto to forgive me for interrupting. He's up at. Please, don't take don't learn the wrong lessons from what we're telling you.
Right, of course.
You're not. We do not have time. And this, first of all, it's not you. We're on the same team. The 7 members of this council, of this board of directors, are plain citizens with full-time jobs, full-time family responsibility, who do it for free,
Right.
and with a lot of love and attention. It is a team, and we do not have time because of reasons that preceded you. It has nothing to do with you individually. For a learning curve, so what I can contribute to you is to save you a lot of time. I've been here 40 years.
Right.
And I was on the original charter commission that drafted this. So I have a sense of people. People are, as I said earlier, looking for immediate action and tangible and physically seeable action.
Right.
They are absolutely fatigued about consultants and about studies. So I want you to not, you don't need another 2 months, and you don't need to reach out to anybody else. It's as plain as that. So that knowledge that you have and experience can now be go into a metamorphosis of good management through Jake's department and the manager to make those things done.
Absolutely.
People need to see, literally need to see something
on the
being
beach.
done. And we'll make the hard decisions, whether
Right.
it's about going to bond issue or not. But please don't, let's not, planning for resiliency and everything else, that would be, the three of us who have spoken before, the other fellow who also submitted himself to the insult of being an elected official, because all we get is criticism. Just take it for, don't go through the pain and suffering that we went through. Trust me, this is where the citizens and shareholders are. And if we get past that and we get that mentality, we're going to be all successful.
Right.
All
Well, I'm a
successful.
firm
sorry
believer
for
that we
interrupting
are
you,
a
Council.
team, and I'm a firm believer that it's going to take
Okay.
all of our
Don't
lifting
my
to
point
get
is,
it
don't
done.
Get defensive. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with our team, with the whole team, the professional team, the shareholders, and the board of directors. We
Agreed.
will literally, to finish your metaphor, we'll sink together if we don't do this right.
Yes, indeed.
Dr. Samimi, can you share with the group
Well,
the
poor
status
Fausto has
of
been
the?
waiting for a
Oh,
while.
okay.
And I don't want Fausto to be mad at me because once every 3 years he pays for a sandwich or something.
Can you unmute yourself,
Yeah.
Fausto?
Yes,
Or-
Mr. Fausto, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Luis. Mr. Samimi, welcome to Key Biscayne. Thank you for an excellent presentation. Those are things that we need to look at long-term. But I agree with my friend Luis Laredo. We need to act now, and there are things that can be done today, short-term, which the village has failed to do. Let me give you a perfect example. The dunes on the beach. You yourself said shoreline protection, the dunes are one of the most important things in order to protect our property values. Right behind the Ocean Club, for example, there were dunes there. They were eradicated by Hurricane Irma. They protected flooding at the Ocean Club, as well as other condominiums around the beach area that had dunes that no longer exist. Hurricane Irma was in 2016, 2017. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've been talking as residents of the Ocean Club and residents of other condominiums that we need to redo the dunes, and nothing has happened. So I would suggest that perhaps the first project that you undertake, we're in the middle of hurricane season right now, is to provide protection to the condominiums on the beach and the property values that you yourself laid out in your presentation, and we can get those dunes done now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what's the response?
Yes, no,
That's-
yes.
thank
So
you.
right now, the
Excuse me.
sand on the beach in the dunes that's the first project up. So the council already authorized the permitting and the design work, and we expect to have sands on the beach in 21. So
2021 is the next beach nourishment window where sand's going to be getting put on the beach, and that's already programmed, and it's already paid for, and it's already being worked out.
With all due respect to you, the dunes are not a question of beach renourishment. The dunes essentially is building that infrastructure on the beach, at the end of the beach, in order to protect storm surge.
I understand the dunes, and I understand how they operate, and I also understand that you can't just show up at the Ocean Club with dump trucks full of sand to build up your dunes. There's a whole process
Well, don't we,
to go through in order to make that happen.
I know the process very, very well. Don't we have a recurring permit from DEP to truck sands into Key Biscayne?
For the beach nourishments, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. And essentially, I also understand DEP extremely well, okay, that they will allow us to build those dunes if we truck in X number of trucks in order to build the dunes. And all we need to do is ask. Because essentially, it is a policy of DEP to make sure we have shoreline protection and protection of property values as well.
Well, that's something that Jake and I will certainly be happy to reach out to the DEP to look into and see how to go about getting that done. But I agree that the dunes, they need to be, they need to be taken care of, and they need to be maintained, and they need to be built up to the extent that they can under the constraints that we face, whether they're regulatory or fiscal. So Jake and I will look into that with the DEP.
Okay, and we can expect to hear back from Andrea, you, or Jake, or someone?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
All right, next we have Steve Powell. Powell, please go ahead and unmute.
Let's see if I could unmute that. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak, and welcome aboard, Doctor, to our wonderful little paradise here. I first wanted to acknowledge the council member. I think you're absolutely right. This is America, right? We look for short-term fixes. I think we're all anxious to see something happen here. And Mr. Gomez, you're usually always on point, and I think you are as well tonight. It's interesting when we kind of think about this situation that we're facing here. And as a homeowner in the Ocean Club and also a homeowner on the island in a single family property, I'm particularly interested in this subject. And when you think about, and as I've watched, from a tax revenue standpoint, I'm a finance guy in real estate, so I think about dollars and cents, and I think about real estate values. And it's very interesting, as we all learned about the assessed values going down last year, which makes no absolute sense at all when you think about what a paradise this is and how unique Key Biscayne is. But, as you guys look at the village level at floating bond issues, or however you're going to raise money to, take on and tackle some of these projects, I would only recommend, from my background standpoint, that you put out there in front what we're really talking about here. We're talking about preserving property values. We're talking about preserving tax revenue, and people's quiet enjoyment and pleasure in living on this island. And, as Mr. Gomez was speaking, about the dunes and the beach nourishment, just to give you a capsule on what I'm talking about, those cabanas that sit on the beach just at the Ocean Club are probably $30 million of property value plus. And what that must mean from a tax assessment standpoint. And when you look at the other condos, that's just the Ocean Club. Spread it along that whole beach. Spread it along our shoreline on the bay side. That when you start to back into what the impact could be by not taking immediate action, it's quite significant. And I would venture to say it's even more than what we've looked at over the last couple of years in decline in assessed value. So I am completely behind the village's efforts. Doctor, I welcome your time. I think we were going to meet last week and it didn't work out on our schedules. I look forward to doing that in the next week or so. I play, president of the Ocean Club Association during the nights and the mornings before the day job. So we welcome anything you can do for all of our neighbors on the shoreline, both on the west side and the east side of Key Biscayne. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your input and your thoughts and your support. I want to stress that we can do everything possible to adapt to a reality that's coming the best we can, but we also have to understand that it's like you can only do so much, and at some point there's going to be implications down the road, because you're never going to completely be able to hold back the ocean. And so the challenge really is balancing sort of where we're at and what we do now and how far that gets us down the road, with an understanding that we're never going to 100% solve the problem. The problem's always going to be there. And I think it's important. I mean, I agree with everything that you just said, but I think it's also important to put people's expectations in the right context. Because if people think that we're going to invest, however, well, let's just say $100 million to deal with these types of problems that we have, shoreline protection, stormwater, utilities, whatnot, and that's going to make the problem like completely go away and we're never going to face the problem again, everyone's going to be very disappointed. And so I think people have to understand, like, we're never going to be completely dry. Our feet may still be a little bit wet. If we had all the money in the world, maybe we could keep them dry a little bit longer, but we still never really get rid of the problem. And, the reality is we can engineer a stormwater system to the tune of $500 million or more or less and have dry streets 90% of the time, but there's still going to be 10% of the time where you're not going to have dry streets. Now, who wants to spend $500 million for, 90% of the time dry? Maybe we can only afford to spend $100 million and understand that we're still surrounded by water and we still live on an island and we're still going to have wet feet sometimes. These are the sorts of expectations that have to be sort of.
But Doctor, forgive me for monopolizing this debate. Perfection is the enemy of progress.
I agree.
And you will never, from me or anybody on this island, don't underestimate people's involvement here, are going to question you for offering or us a perfect solution. What they will question you is for lack of action.
Agreed.
And so even when you make a mistake, like I've told our wonderful police department, we will have your back, particularly when you make mistakes, because you will make mistakes. And people understand that. What they do not tolerate, because they don't get that toleration in their respective jobs and businesses, is all this definition of a problem, and they literally don't see anybody doing, whether it's 50%, 100%, nobody expects us to control us. You remember that I said that we think we do, but we still can't control nature. But we have a responsibility to get out there and do something and say, maybe it didn't work. You know what? You'll be fine.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Forgiven for is, I got to do another study.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
2007 thing that then metamorphed into the something in 17th study is correct. So let me call the Corps of Engineer. We got involved in that, Doctor, because I showed up at the Corps of Engineer regional meeting, even though I wasn't invited, and also was invited to speak. And I met all the right people because I pushed my way in, because that's the people who pay me nothing, expect from me.
Right.
And that's called proactive leadership. And I want to just instill constructively the spirit of proactivity as our extension, as your board of directors, that we need your help to satisfy the legitimate demands of our shareholders. And I'll tell you, Steve, I really like what you said. And I would say, for the next time you talk about it, what we're trying to protect here is that it's a lifestyle, and that is equal to property values.
Right.
When we had, before the pandemic and all the other stuff, when we had last year the problems with the beaches, since I spend most of my time in international, you'd be surprised how many people were trying to sell their property because they saw, you remember what it was like and the smell, and they saw no action. And so I said, maybe I ought to move to Bal Harbor, sell here. So the here is, and we have it so easy, folks, because we are an island. Yes, that provides us with certain problems. It also gives us a confined, manageable piece of geography or topography that we can work with a lot better than other municipalities that have runoff from everybody else. So for the 10th time, we need to move on with plain English communication with our shareholders about what we're doing, with the caveats that we're not going to fix things, because as far as until Fausto Gomez comes up with a solution, we're not going to control nature. But he's working on it.
Couldn't agree with you more.
By the way, Fausto and Steve, I walked on the beach for the first time this Sunday, and of course I couldn't walk on your beach because there was no beach. I had to turn back. So I sympathize with you guys at Ocean Club. Anyway, I'm sorry, Doctor. And welcome. We love to have you here.
No need
It
to
was not easy
apologize.
to
I
fund the
agree
resilience
100%.
office. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No worries.
All right, I have Alan Fine wishing to speak.
I was just going to add, I thought what Fausto said was great, and I remember John Hinson when he first built the Ocean Club, and his hair was on fire every 4 or 5 years about how his beach was going away, and you know, we had to go in there every once in a while and do it. But what I don't know, I was listening to this about Fausto's and Steve's immediate problem, and I'm sure the village man, I don't know, but maybe you guys can answer. The village manager and Roland, who just started, is probably thinking, well, you know, nobody at the council just told me to go ahead and authorize the expenditure of X dollars to fix the beach in that area right now. To me, it sounds like a pretty good idea, but you know, I don't know from a legislative point of view how you guys turn on a dime and get that done. I think the beauty of Key Biscayne, I think Luis is right, and the reason why we escaped from the county originally was we could be nimble and we could do things a lot quicker, and you know, and it was great to be able to actually have our own police station as opposed to a little room where you'd knock on the door and nobody would ever answer. So yeah, we should be able to address these issues quickly, and that's a perfect example. If we can do something about that right now, that would be great. But you know, Miss Manager's probably thinking, well, gee, you know, I gotta some 4 people on the council's got to tell me I got to spend X $100,000 or X $1 million right now to do it. And if you tell me to do it, I'll do it. But you know, I think Fausto and Steve deserve an answer. But I don't know whether anybody's gone to the council and asked for the money to do it.
Yeah, so we have the nourishment that we've been working on, the sand for the beach for 21.
For 21, yeah.
For 20, yeah, so sand on the beach next year. It's been about probably 2.5 years in the making between the permitting and we secured grant funding from FDEP and FEMA. So the project is fully funded through grants. And the last step was the design authorization from council probably 2 months ago, which is what is going to enable us to put sand on the beach. So we've been working. It basically, you know, takes that long, unfortunately. So thankfully, though, we've been working on it since I started, and that will result in sand on the beach in 21. And in our proposed capital improvement plan, we have another nourishment plan for 23 and 25. And to Mr. Gomez's point, the dune restoration, the authorized work now, they're going to replenish the sand within the dunes, but the infrastructure, I know we've got some PVC pipes that are coming out. I've walked by the beach there too. It is non-existent, especially at high tide. So it'll make it better, but to your point, it's not the full restoration. And Dr. Samimi, you and I can speak offline. There's something else that Fausto and I had been working on that I can bring you up to speed on that might help expedite the solution, in particular where that very narrow portion of beach is.
Yeah, no, that'd be great, and I'm happy to do what I can to help move that down the beach.
I had just, by the way, one of the things I wanted to talk with Roland about is how that, you know, the Ocean Club seems to be at the nadir of that crescent where the problem is, and you know, I think we should explore other ways to capture sand to be able to move it back over into that spot of the crescent, so that we don't have to do it every.
No, I very much look forward to speaking with you about that, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. And then I'd like to share some of the things that I know about coastal systems and how they function, and then we can sort of brainstorm it and see how we can integrate that into the grant proposal that I'm trying to get pulled together for July 31st.
I have a question for Fausto and Steve, because one of my pet frustrations is the inability to communicate. And if you two guys did not know about this, then I'm really going to be frustrated and skip the dinner with my daughter today. Did you all know what the manager just told us of all the progress we have made?
Come on, guys. Come on, guys.
Well, I mean, the problem is,
I know, I hear you.
Madam Manager, you know, people, you know, it's called misinformation, spinning. It's hard enough that we're going to get hit for mistakes we make. We don't seem to have the simple capacity of communicating. I would have put up a sign, as I've told you now for over a year, on all our parks, so that people would know that it's their taxpayers' money with the name of the park, including the one that was donated by the developer, the so-called Lake Park, said, this is your park. And I would have put up a damn sign on the beach,
you know what?
About a year ago, saying, this is coming.
We should put up a sign on the beach, Nourishment Coming 21, project
that
sign.
My good friend, brilliant Mr. Fine, said earlier today is, this is not rocket science. A big sign explaining in plain English what you just said would really help us elected officials.
Okay.
So that people know we're working on it. Read about it as you walk about it. And I just don't seem to get through. We hire communications people and consultants and studies and this and that. And
it's on me. It's on me. It's on me.
Put up signs. You know, people still read signs. People still think the lake park is part of Ocean Club.
Okay, let me ask you, Councilmember Laredo, let me ask you this one question.
Your doctors have problem that we have with communicating our achievements.
No, but I want your input on this, because we were just talking to AECOM, and maybe we should have this conversation offline, but we were just talking about AECOM, about how we were going to use those two properties on Harvard Drive that are called Resiliency Park, or referred to as Resiliency Park. And we want to use those two properties and in some way integrate them into the stormwater management system. So maybe as we're formulating that, we should put up a sign there once it's clear and it's turned into sort of like a park, put up a sign saying, look, this is how the
project sign's already on order.
Relative but here,
stormwater system.
Again, I went by there, and I know Jake several weeks ago, and nothing was happening. He got on it, and now it's almost finished demolishing. They have a fence with a band around it, and with the name of the company. And we missed the opportunity of putting up, literally, your taxpayers' money at work, your new parks. Why is this so difficult? It's been 1 year. Why is it so difficult? That is the best way to, Madam Manager, it's only a tiny little island. Literally a small little island. Use signage. That was a golden opportunity. It's still up there to put our sign saying, this is your money at work, your parks.
Right.
You know, it's, yeah, but right. But it doesn't get done. Enough. I'm sorry, we got off resiliency. But it is a little frustrating sometimes, as Alan Fine well knows. Anyway,
All right, Madam Manager, Dr. Samimi, I have no one else signed up to speak at the moment.
Well, all right.
Thank you
very
all.
much. It was a pleasure speaking to you all and listening to you all.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening. Take care.